Well, we've just seen the ideas and values that inspired Thomas Jefferson's design thinking, resulting in that very noble aspirational goal of wanting to create designs, buildings, and landscapes uniquely reflective of the new nation. Next, we'll see how he went about translating those ideas into physical form, his design decisions. So, where to start? Well, architecture first. He began by looking at what was already popular in the colonies and found this, a Georgian style. It has solidity, it was symmetry in the facade, it was overall a very solid building, but completely inappropriate for political reasons. The style itself was named after England's King George. Jefferson knew this style literally was used to house English nobility and represented England's dominance over the colonies. So that won't do. Another popular style was known as the Federal style. Now, Jefferson really scrutinized the Federal, noting that it was a style usually rendered in wood. It emphasized the horizontal lines more than vertical. He, in fact, characterized it looking like a woman trussed up in a corset. And then the interiors of the Federal buildings were frequently decorated with very delicate garlands made of plaster, all of which Jefferson found entirely too fragile looking and uncomfortably stiff. It was just all too delicate to represent the robust ideas of this new republic. Jefferson felt that something much more vital, more powerful and monumental was needed to embody the enduring power and ideas of the new nation. And where does he find that? Of course, no surprise, in the architecture of the last great republic, ancient Rome. Jefferson thought dignity, solidity, and monumentality of ancient Roman architecture would absolutely successfully embody the grandeur of American ideals. And what we're going to see then is that he adopted these ideas very directly with very little revision. Because when Jefferson gazed at a work like this, for example, the Arch of Severus, he realized that after almost 2,000 years, this work maintained its grand dignity. Jefferson thus felt that the timeless quality of this architecture would be perfect to suggest the timelessness of America's enduring values. But his process was a bit more complicated than just making this decision. Actually, Jefferson was borrowing ancient Roman architecture through kind of an architectural middleman. His name was Andrea Palladio. Now, Palladio was an Italian Renaissance fellow who had literally sifted through the ancient Roman ruins to derive inspiration. Palladio particularly created measured drawings from these ruins, showing what those buildings had originally looked like. And he put all of these measured drawings together in a huge book called The 4 Volumes on Architecture. Now, that book, which restated the principles of ancient Roman architecture based on ancient Greek architecture, became a kind of an architectural Bible for Jefferson. Jefferson then borrowed liberally from this ancient architectural style to represent American ideals. And we'll shortly see what he did with it, but let's pause and take a look at landscapes for a moment. Now, given Jefferson's enormous love for American natural scenery, it's no small wonder that as he looked at the kinds of landscape designs that were popular in his time, he saw ideas that he appreciated and some that he really despised. For example, the style of the formal Baroque gardens that were popular in Williamsburg, Virginia, where he went to college. To this, Jefferson said, no, this was absolutely not going to do it. It's too rigid. It's too controlled. It suggests human domination over nature, and that really just is not what we are about here. Well, listen, folks, this topic does not immediately follow the English landscape school and sequence for no reason, because Jefferson, in fact, was a contemporary of Capability Brown and others of the English landscape school persuasion. He looked at this style, the pastoral English landscape, and felt this is exactly what we need in America. The idea that the English landscape school deferred to and emphasized nature's beauty was, to Jefferson, absolutely appropriate. Where nature's beauty, he felt, was found everywhere. In fact, Jefferson toured the English gardens of Capability Brown and others in 1786, took copious notes, and brought them back to influence his own design ideas in the United States. So Jefferson, very much a proponent of the English landscape school aesthetic for landscape design. It suited America well, he felt, because here nature's beauty was found everywhere. It was simply a matter of enhancing it. So now we have some understanding of Jefferson's design sensibility and his sources of inspiration. As we look at two of his most famous designs, you see on the screen Monticello and the Academical Village at what is now the University of Virginia, we're going to see how his inspirations resulted in a truly American celebration of that nation's qualities. First, Monticello. Monticello was Jefferson's own home outside of Charlottesville, Virginia, conspicuously meaning little mountain in Italian, and indeed it sits on top of a hill. Jefferson started grading that hillside in 1768, but this was an ongoing project for him and a great love for many, many decades. In Monticello, what we're going to see is a direct adaptation of Palladio's ideas about the Italian villa. Palladio was a practitioner as well as someone who was recording the past. So he actually had clients, and these are his own ideas. So Palladio felt that if you really think about a villa, it boils down to this. The house is the focus of the entire place. Palladio likened it to the head on a body. But there are other facets of a villa that are necessary, and he referred to them as dependencies, and this would include the servants' quarters, the ice house, the stables, the kitchen, and so on. The function of the dependencies are needed to support those activities and the pleasures of the people living in the house. So Palladio was thinking of the house as the human head and the dependencies as appendages, the arms and legs that make the body function. Consequently, when Palladio designed villas, he came up with the configuration that you see in this image. He would locate the house, which is in the very center at the top, and then he would physically attach those dependencies onto the house as if they were arms, so that all the things the arms do would be accessible, useful, and convenient to the people in the house. Well, so that's Palladio's idea of a villa. Head and dependencies. Now, when we look at Monticello, we'll find it's an exact replica of Palladio's villa layout, except one important distinction. Jefferson borrowed an idea from the ancient Greeks, the idea of the dramatic siting of buildings. You remember how the Greeks theatrically cited temples in their landscapes, using nature's power to reinforce the temple's importance? Well, Jefferson's intent at Monticello was to present the house with equal flair, and he cited the house prominently on the hilltop. Well, that's great, but what about those arms, the attached dependencies? He put the head, the house, on top of the hill. But then he sunk the arms, the dependencies, one level lower, into the sides of the hill. In other words, the dependencies were in fact below grade, visible and accessible on the sides of the hill, but not visually prominent when viewing the house by itself. Well, what that meant was that when you were in the house, if you looked out at the dependency wings, what you saw were not long building arms. What you saw was a walkway extending into the landscape on each side of the house, a lovely place to stroll. And that walkway is, in effect, the roof of that dependency wing. This design strategy allowed Jefferson all the convenience of Palladio's ideas of the villa, plus a maximum ability to dramatically site the house within its pastoral landscape, which in this case happened to be the very spectacular scenery of the Blue Ridge Mountains outside of Charlottesville. I'm sure you won't be surprised to realize that Jefferson's next move was to utilize the principles of the English Landscape School at his home. And indeed, the turf foreground, the trees carefully placed to enframe distant mountain views, well, these are all classic English Landscape School techniques. So, Jefferson's house then, or the head of the villa, was designed to appear almost like a temple of antiquity, expressing human dignity as a harmonious complement to nature's inherent beauty. In his house, in fact, we see Jefferson's effort to find the simplest, the strongest, the most monumental forms to embody the new republic by borrowing ideas from Palladio and from ancient Rome. Now, here's another notable design detail. Jefferson's buildings were made of red brick and white trim, and he did this for a very special reason. Now, traditionally, Roman temples and their neoclassical imitations were, in fact, made of stone, or made at least to look like stone. But Jefferson chose brick for a very specific reason. Remember, he considered himself a man of the earth, a farmer primarily, the man close to God because his hands were in the soil, the farmer being the most blessed of all men. So he decided to make his buildings literally of the soil, or as close as he could get, which happened to be red brick, made, of course, from the clay of the soil. So this red brick and white trim, the trim was added to give a sense of refinement to the overall look, becomes a trademark of Jefferson's work. In all of Monticello, then, what you're really seeing is Jefferson's use and adaptation of ancient Roman architecture and the English landscape school aesthetic to create a wholly new American style that's trying to express the dignity of humankind in harmony with the powerful beauty of nature.